So he won't even do that. So it's just the way it is, you know. And you know, I suppose the way he looks at it, he expresses everything in his wine. And when people try it, that's where it all is. You know, he doesn't need to say any more. And you know, and as I said, it's you know, a very different. I don't know. Like there's a lot of great winemakers who are a little bit like this also in Australia. I mean, you know, they're just reluctant to get out there and you know, I suppose share their secrets in a lot of ways. I mean, they share it in their wine. And
I remember back in the day being told that he was quite a shy person by nature. And I remember people saying that even when he was a lighty at Torbreck and what have you, it was the same, you know, meeting people and talking and what have you was apparently not his favorite thing.
That's right.
Exactly. And, you know, like I mean, you've only got to look at, you know, some of the things that have been said about him by, you know, some of the great writers in the world. I mean, they indicate that he's the best Shiraz maker in, you know, one of the great winemakers in Australia and the best Shiraz maker. And a lot of it's testament to the fact the family's been there so long. And similarly with the access they've got to some of the great Barossa vineyards. And that really probably where it all is, you know, the big secret. If he wasn't Barossa family, he would not get access to this fruit. And you know, the fruit's rare, small production, incredibly old vines, and you know, they don't make a lot. Some of these wines, the maximum production is 300 dozen, and you can imagine, particularly when Suckling come out last year and rated the Lamella as the 4th best wine in the world and the top Australian wine, and then you look at where all the others were, you go, wow, you know. And Dan has openly said to me, and I've been able to go to South Australia, he honestly believes that these are better wines than the 18s. Now, that's a big statement, but that's what he honestly believes, that they're better.
Well, that's probably the right segue to kick off. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I'm super keen to see, thanks, Greg, as well, for your participation, mate. I'm really glad about the timing of this event, because most of the Standish that we've been able to offer to Singapore is based on Stuart McCloskey's reviews, which are effectively all 99 to 100, with the Relic number 4 being the actual the 100-pointer. Let me just double check. I have that right. Yeah. Anyway, it's aside the point about McCloskey, but what's come out now, and you'll have a look in a little bit. I've done a comparative of regions, and Mike Benny and Gary Walsh. So more conservative writers, but at the end of the day, it's what we as consumers think about the wines themselves. But it's quite interesting to see that Walsh and Benny both rated, Lamella got the highest rating at 96 from them. All the others got 95 to 96 spreads. One got 94.5. We'll go into it in a little while, but a more sort of studied, more conservative approach from those blokes. So that it might give you some indication of what to look for. Some background to Dan before he went up in his own. Like most seasoned Australian winemakers, done some time in various other parts of the world. He worked at La Rioja in Spain. He spent a good chunk of time in Napa and Sonoma, before, and also at Torbreck before coming back and doing his own thing. As Greg pointed out in the beginning of this tonight, the real juice comes from these guys who are multi-generational contacts in Barossa to these tiny growers. That's really is what made Torbreck what it is today. What makes Powell and Sons what it is today, and what makes Standish what it is today. So let's have a look at this lineup, if I can possibly work this out. These are the 4 you're seeing tonight. Let me just reduce this so we can get some space. That's the order that we're looking at the 4 this evening. Eden Valley, by reputation, has the distinction of being a cooler climate. But what you'll notice here, when you look at the altitude differences, there isn't a hell of a difference above sea level between all of these. Mararanga, the Theorem site, probably being the closest in style based just on the mathematics in style to the Lamella. But even obviously just even 20 or 30 meters above sea level increase is going to define a difference in style. But if one looks at Eden Valley, you're looking at a cooler place in terms of winds, in terms of external climate and mesoclimate effects on the soils. And that's definitely having an impact on the wine. I would say that Lamella is probably the label now the most sought after, and as Greg pointed out, the most highly respected, the 18, the most highly respected wine out of Australia, full stop, with suckling. I also noticed doing some digging around tonight that Lamella is now sold out in most retail places in Australia. It's certainly the one. We've had an interesting phenomenon here with Standish, where we've actually got people who can't get the stock in Australia and are buying and actually setting up cellars with us in the hopes that at some point the universe might let us all fly again, and they'll actually fly to Singapore to collect their wine. And that's the degree of local fervor that's hit this 2019 vintage. It's all very well to hear what a winemaker says about the vintage, and we're going to have a look at the style in a minute, but really consumers are voting with their feet. And it really is showing in consumer demand globally. We've had interest out of Hong Kong as well. So it's really been terrific, and I thank Greg for allowing us to get some access to all of this. So maybe you want to just have a look at the phenolics of all 4 at this point and get an idea of what the wines are giving up. I will say that at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock today, the Lamella's nose was the most urgent, the most expressive, the one that kind of reached out of the glass. Thinking back to my times in Australia, the Relic was always the most vibrant of the 2, the Relic being here wine number 4. And the one, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it gets this splash of Viognier. This year it's only 1%. In years gone by, it's been up to 7%, but there's no questioning the phenolics that, well, for me earlier today, that wine number 4 was definitely, that Viognier, tiny a percentage as it is from Krondorf, was having a definite point of view in the wine.
No doubt.
So I would say that those 2, 1 and 4, are probably going to be the more expressive tonight. 2 and 3 are going to be the ones that take slightly longer to come into play. And I'd be super interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. Any thoughts from anybody on any opinions on the phenolics? Anyone want to say anything? No? Let's have a look. Yeah, it's interesting for me. I think maybe the Relic is now a little more expressive than it was earlier today. Maybe it's that double decanting that's having an impact on it. But I really am in love with what the Lamella has to say. You know, this style of Shiraz is a very polarizing style of making wine. We think about the years gone by when Robert Parker really endorsed the notion of heavily flavored, powerful, muscular, structured wines, and anointed them with massive ratings. I think that this is an example of one of the very few labels that's managed to go through that entire transition of popularism and ratings and what have you, and come out the other end and still be producing the same style that they were doing 10 years ago, but doing it maybe in a more elevated, in a more considered kind of way. And I think that's what Dan has definitely nailed in his making of his wines. Yeah, Sean, I think that Lamella really is taking the cake. I mean, it's interesting because that's definitely what consumers are saying about this this 2019 range, is that Lamella is the one that seems to be nailing it from consumers' preference point of view. Yeah, Dennis, there's a beautiful elevation and structure. There's a nuance to Lamella that takes it to for me a higher level. Definitely the jazziness of that Viognier. You know, one of the telltale aspects of Viognier in blends is, for me anyway, is an orange rind kind of note, top note. It's something that's going to show a little bit more of that kind of jazziness. I guess it's a lazy word, but for me, it always seems to nail it on the head. The Lamella jar number 1, 300 dozen produced, as is the Standish number 2. I couldn't get production numbers on the other 2 after much digging around. It's Dan's site is kind of hard to get into if you're not a member, and I unfortunately I'm not as of this afternoon anyway.
Well, Greg, do you know production numbers on this?
No, I do know production. The other 2, the production's a little bit higher.
Okay.
And particularly the Relic, he managed to get more fruit on the Relic. He's produced 500 dozen of the Relic. The Schubert's Theorem was 450. Again, it's the newest wine to the group. But when you look at it, you know, like this is the total production from one winemaker. Oh, yeah. Under the Standish brand. So you're looking at incredibly small volumes when you look at total production from a winery. And no wonder, given the standing of where, well, that's a great, of Dan's presence and demand, it's unbelievable what's going on in the world with where the wines are. But, you know, I totally agree. I don't know how many people had the 18 Lamella, but if you've ever opened the 18 Lamella, there is a lot more concentration in the 19. You're getting a lot more concentration, and that probably reflects the lower yields that happened in that year. And it was dramatically affected very early in the vintage. In other words, when the vines were flowering and the fruit set time, that was the big impact on the 19s that you're looking at right now.
I think from a flavor profile point of view, the things I'm pulling out of the Lamella the most, coffee, some chocolate, and a kind of soothing detail on the tannins. There's something really fine, really pointed tannins that are incredibly finely constructed. There's an impressive length to the wine. And maybe some inkiness was something else that jumped into my head on that. That inky component is something that I often relate to the Relic, and see if anyone can see that in the Relic as well. I couldn't find
the alcohol, Robert, on the wines.
Yeah,
they are all declared at 14.9%.
Yeah.
The winery will tell you they're 14.9%. There's a little bit of variation on that 14.9%. We're allowed 0.5% within Australia, up or down. So what you see on the label, and I haven't got a bottle in front of me, but the label may say 14.5.
Yeah.
But
it's the same. It's the same as the Clarendon Hills wines. We've sold an enormous amount of that over the years, and every single bottle has exactly the same label on the back, and it says 14.5%. And everyone seems to be okay with that idea. So who knows, Greg?
Yeah, well, that's the like we've got the supposedly official analysis on every wine, and they all say 14.9%. Now that might be true, but I don't want to question it.
Sure. With the Standish, it's the one that seems to stand out the most in terms of alcohol for me. it's interesting because that's definitely the lower altitude of all of them. We're talking about we being very fractional now, but 260 meters above sea level. And I don't know if that sort of heat area is contributing to that. The roots themselves, they were grafted onto their own roots in 2002, which represents the youngest grafting of the four. The Relic number 4 was the one that was grafted on in 91, apologies. And number 3, the Theorem, is on its own roots again in 94 and 99. So reinvigorated vines, but built on original rootstock, which is always the key. What you should maybe try and find in that Standish number 2 is an amped up spice spectrum, maybe leaning into Asian spice in number 2, something that seems quite distinctive aside from 1, 3, and 4. And then the Theorem, this is the very first time I've ever tasted Theorem number 3, Mararanga. The actual vines themselves come from the Schubert family, which are multi-generational owners of vineyards in Barossa. And certainly is that tribute to what Greg was saying a little earlier about these relationships that Dan has with established families. Let's have a look at the actual wine. Again, coffee. Oh, amazing length. It's incredible length. That might be the gun on all 3 of them in terms of its sustainability for me right now. Obviously, these wines are going to change enormously over time. We're looking at them at a very, very young stage. It's the same kind of phenomenon that we encountered with that 100-pointer throwdown we did about a week ago, where we're just getting a window into where these wines are going to go. It's hardly the right time to take a viewpoint on quality side by side. All we're really doing is trying to look into the phenolics a little bit, trying to look at the balance. The thing that really is going to bring out the best understanding of the wines at this stage is the balance. Is the wine balanced now? Because just even if the fruit's a little tight, a little closed at this stage, that's going to give you an indication of its longer term trajectory. Greg, I couldn't really dig up too much on the maturation curves of these things, but I'm guessing decades. Certainly when I look at the stuff that Dan made years ago, it's still holding relatively well at this stage, thinking of the early 2000s.
There is no reason why they won't hold up. There's a couple of them that are relatively new. The Schuberts that you're looking at right now, that's a relatively new addition to where Dan is. But who knows? I mean, like, I've seen all these wines in barrel, but I have not opened them since. So I try to keep a few myself every year, but I'm not going to open them, sit here and drink 4 bottles myself tonight. So I haven't got wine in front of me, but
it's been known to happen, Greg.
Yeah, well, like if I had a group of people here, I'd do it because when we've seen these wines in barrel, I've got to say that they looked amazing. I would have picked the Schuberts, to be honest, as being my standout wine at that time.
Yeah.
Now, remember, as you go into bottle and put them in the bottle, you see a lot of things that are very different. Marananga, maybe I'm biased by that region, Central Barossa. It's where some of the great vineyards are based. So I love wines from Marananga because the power and richness that you get, and also the perfume you get, particularly from the older vines. Are you getting perfume from that wine right now?
Yeah.
Is it really perfume?
There's perfume, but it's still, I get the sense of it being super tightly coiled still. And that doesn't put me off at all, because that seems to always assure me that it's just got a future. It's just way too soon.
Yeah.
So and also I guess looking at these 4 different soil types, that they're gonna define and drive the characteristics of these wines at different points along their life, their curves, right? So
they are, you know, Robert and everyone else, they are from the iconic region. They're right across the Barossa Valley. If anyone's been to the Barossa, Light Pass is when you at the northern, the southern part of the Barossa. Krondorf is even further south in terms of the Barossa. When you look at Marananga, you're way up. If anyone's been to Seppeltsfield, that vineyard is close to where Seppeltsfield is. So you're starting to move to the northern part of the Barossa. So they're all different regions within the Barossa, and that's why you're getting different characteristics. The soils are very different as you move across the Barossa. Also.
Yeah, I actually found some notes on that, Greg, where Dan was talking about ironstone gravels with the Standish with layered schist, and then I was finding stuff on Lamella where they're not from Dan but from other sources where they're talking about a clay component to the soils, and certainly that's driving it. It's certainly helping define the style of the wines.
Yeah. So
I think that Relic for me tonight is it's showing in a subtler way just the impact of Northern Rhone blending, and for me it's the most subtle expression of all the other vintages that I've had of his. So I'm thinking maybe a fairly solid 10 years worth of releases that I've been lucky enough to look at over the years with you and with Lou. And I would say that this one has a very different point of view. It has the flair that Viognier always lends to that label, but just slightly more tempered. And I kind of like where it's going. There's the tannins are so not powdery. There's definitely a perception of texture to the tannin, which is great, and it's very different for me as compared to the other 3.
Yeah, but as you stated before, Robert, the level of Viognier in this wine is extremely low, and even for it, remember it's co-fermented, so even it wasn't that relevant from what I remember when we tried it in barrel.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Hey?
Yeah, it was not sticking out like you'd normally get, and particularly when you look at previous vintages, it's really there was up to 7%, as you said, in some previous vintages. Now, whether this wine is different as a result of that, whether it's a better wine, I don't know, but I still think there's an element of Viognier in there.
Oh, there's a swagger to it. No question, Greg. There's definitely the swagger is there, but it's just a little bit more neatly done to me, a bit more tempered.
I think that's super important, because sometimes the idea is, more Viognier you add to a wine, the more it's going to stand out, the more you're going to have a more powerful nose. Is that really where you want to go? I'm envious of you guys drinking the wine.
Well, what's so cool about this, I remember I was looking at my emails to you. It was a while ago now. It was almost 6 weeks ago that you said, well, we've got the stuff. What do you want to do? And I was immediately really jazzed about it, because in all the years that I've been selling Standish, I've never had a chance to see the entire lineup in one go, in one setting. So I'm really happy to be able to do this tonight.
Yeah, no, it's but again, like, the difference is the important thing. To see 4 wines lined up from the same producer that is obviously has the same ideas in terms of making it, but yet and I gather everyone from listening to what you're saying is very different. And it's always been like that in every time that I've seen some older ones, and particularly and even when they were tried out of barrel, the difference is mind-boggling. And And anyway, but it's fascinating what's Stefan's saying about
the approachability.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that perception would be with wines like this, and particularly from older vine Barossa, that you would not be able to drink them. But the decanting's probably helped, but also you're getting a couple of other things that are helping and assisting in terms of where the wine is.
That vintage heat's going to push the Beaumet up a little bit. It's all of those things, but I think there's genuine skill coming from the winemaker here, where
no doubt
he's deciding that he's allowing nuances of the wines to come together in a very stylized and classically Standish way. I think it's a really smart. I can see why Dan's talking about this being possibly one of his best vintages ever. It just seems like the wines are superbly well crafted at this stage. Really.
It's like it's still, the wine advocate and suckling are still yet to see the wines. Now, there is absolutely no doubt that, in my mind anyway, that when they are put out there into those forums, that the reviews will
Greg,
crazy.
I've got to say, this is one of the few occasions, as a slippery marketer and salesman at heart, I rely ruthlessly on ratings to sell wines. But in this particular instance tonight, the consumers are deciding to buy these wines because they like them. I actually think that suckling and advocate are going to end up being moot points because people are just buying it straight away. And it's an extraordinary, it's an exciting thing to be part of, because for so many years in Australia in particular, that kind of consumer demand was not there.
True.
It's certainly my life is as a marketer is really simple, just to get as many people to taste this as possible, because the stuff is going to disappear really, really quickly.
Yeah. It's but it's all about, like you've got to like the style of wine. It's there was a lot of back five years ago, there was negativity against Shiraz and wines that were like this, and but that's completely turned around.
Jacob, I jump in on your notes about the closedness. I think that's a good thing, because thinking about previous vintages of these wines, they're super flamboyant at the get-go, and here I think there's something. The thing that I'm struck with by all four of them is that there's a certain measured constancy about it. He's been really judicious about how he's crafted these wines this year, and I think it's showing in all four of those wines. I'm not really concerned about that closed component at this stage. It will evolve, because I'm confident enough in the wines themselves to know that in a year or so that gradient's going to change. It's going to evolve.
No doubt.
Robert, Greg, let's go back to my point. I am super surprised. Robert, you know what?
Yeah.
I bought your wines. I keep them 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
I stopped buying wines from Robert for 2-3 years because I had so much 05, so 4, so 6.
Don't worry, Stefan. There's actually clients who self-red card themselves from my newsletters. They actually say, please don't be upset, but I'm unsubscribing. I can't afford you anymore.
I never did that. I said I don't have space anymore, and I stopped. But I wanted to try these because I expect them to be good. But they are extremely drinkable. I mean, of course, 10 years more, super happy. But I would be extremely happy to drink any of these today. Not expect that for this high quality label. Not at all. And I'm surprised. And I want to understand, how do I pick wines that I can do that? Why is it like this?
That's sort of what makes this tasting so cool. I'm really glad to be able to do this tonight with everyone. Yeah, Dennis, I'm a bit befuddled by this notion of tasting wines over a few days. It's very, very, very much an in thing in Australia now.
Correct.
The hipsters are all doing these detailed notes. In fact, it's not even hipsters anymore. It's the next generation after that. I don't know what gen, whatever. They're actually doing notes on day 1, day 2, day 3, and confidently interpreting it. I've never had the luxury of doing that, and I probably wouldn't have the willpower anyway. But there's definitely points to be made about that exact thing. That definitely takes some time. McCloskey is a retailer, which is one of the reasons why it's nice to have a rating when we did a release. But what was really interesting was to see what Mike Benny and Gary Walsh had to say about it, about the wines in a more kind of considered, conservative kind of approach. Yeah, man, when the Lamella is probably the one I'm kind of going to throw my hat in for tonight. It's super good to see the different styles. Why don't we do a little vote and see how many people think number one is their favorite for the night? Dan's the man. Yeah.
Robert, while you're doing that, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
One of the when Parker used to do tastings,
yeah,
he used to talk about pouring a wine, trying it, and leaving it over 3 days, and then that was.
So it's not just the cool kids that do it. I didn't realize.
No.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, and any wine that got better over 3 days.
Yeah.
That's how he judged the life that he believed where the wine was going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, you should try it even if you do open in some of these bottles.
Yeah.
Leave a little bit and then try it. Leave a quarter of a bottle and then try it over a couple of days. It's a mind-boggling experience to do it. Like, everyone talks about Grange and all the rest of it, the better end wines. But if you open some of them and just see where they go, it's a great experience. It really is.
Yeah. I'll see if I can posse a few zealots together and do a tasting where we actually do that exact thing. We actually send out bottles to various houses and we taste them together over a 3-day period. It'd be quite an interesting exercise to do.
Well, maybe another way you could do it is open them 3 days in advance. And do something like. But now that
I'm interested in the evolution. I'm interested in the evolution over 72 hours. How a wine actually.
Yeah. Well, that's
changes.
true. Spot on. Spot on.
It looks like just without voting machines, it looks like number one probably has it, and number 4 is probably following behind. I suppose that's seems to be the crowd consideration for tonight. Somebody's just said the Lamellas are all sold out. We have another 60 available. That if I can ask Lou just to stick the additional allocation onto the Lamella. Greg's given us another 60 of that tonight. It'll take about 2 weeks to fly in, but I'm told that is without question the absolute end of Lamella.
Absolutely. Robert, you're spot on. I mean, this allocation was going to Ontario.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
the Canadians, mate, they're too far away. With apologies, we've actually got some Canadians on here tonight. With apologies to friends.
But the LCBO hasn't even released the 18 yet. So I'm figuring, all right, why should I offer them some 19, given it's so limited? So that's the only reason that you've got that product.
All right, thanks for
that. I'll fix that up. Thanks, Greg. But I think, Rob, for me, the reason number one's standing out is it's just got a creaminess to it that the others don't have.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's terroir or oak or both, but it's got a creaminess to the palate and a polish on the tannins that the other ones don't have. The other ones, I think they're all excellent. Don't get me wrong, but that's what shines out for me. I mean, maybe it's the oak. I'm not sure. What's your?
Well, the words I wrote on the first tasting was tempered. For me, there was something that seemed quite cohesive. It was pulling all the styles and the flair that Standish extracts, but just putting it into something that's just a bit more elevated and refined. And I initially wondered if that was an altitude thing. It's not. It's terroir and macroclimates that are, I think, making that difference there.
It's the same oak across all the 4.
Don't know the answer to that, but I'd be really surprised if he's fiddling with that. He certainly has.
the oak is at the highest end. I can tell you now.
No, what you're saying is there a change in oak approach, the type of oak across the four sides?
I wish I could answer that. I remember, I remember there's certainly not just one oak. He's not using them in one oak for every. There's certainly a quite a structure of when you go into the vineyard, into the cellar area. There's unbelievable amounts of different oak.
Oh, okay. So he's using amalgams of different
amalgams.
Oh, that's super interesting.
And so and I think that assessment is made, when it's a pre assessment that he's made once the wine's gone through ferment.
Such genius in terms of actually making these wines. The notion of co-fermentation just blows my mind. The idea of co-fermenting varietals and then just being able to look into the future of how the wine's going to, I can't understand how someone can be that smart, but he's definitely got it right.
The one that fascinates me is obviously the JT and Marcus for number 3. I've at the moment, number 3 is nowhere near as lifted as the others, but in terms of 3,
it's going to have its own character, Greg. I think it's on a way independent trajectory. I'm super excited by that sense of coiled energy in number 3. You kind of just know something's going to come. The curtain's about to come up on the wine. I can see why McCloskey decided to give the perfect number for what it's worth to number 3 for that. But having said that, Walsh and Benny definitely put their hat in the ring for number 1, Lamella, and that's where my vote's gone.
Okay. Yeah. It's fascinating, really. But
really cool. Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm particularly excited and thankful to Greg for working with us and keeping these wines away from the Canadians. I think us Singaporeans certainly deserve it more.
Come on. Anyway, all good. Good.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good weekend. And we're doing some giant steps next week, and I'll be in touch about that marketing. So thank you all. Dennis, it's on our site. Lou's about to upload the last.
I've just done it. I put them in for a July flying date of July 9. That should be about right.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, that's fine. We should be good with that.
All right.
We'll place the order. Greg, when you next flying? Next Thursday, yeah?
Oh, yeah, next Thursday, correct. So you'll
have
them you can have them next Thursday.
We may have them as early as next Friday, so we'll see.
Yeah. So you can.
I encourage anyone who wants them. Just this is the only bite you're going to get at them. So just take a chunk of them and move on.
Yeah. All right. That's a word from our sales specialist.
Yeah, I'm good at this shit. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you, Robert. Thank you.
Cheers, Greg. Bye.
Yeah, see you, Lou. Look after